Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody to the third workshop of Bmore Beautiful's Urban Gardening on Vacant Lots virtual workshop series. So last week we learned about soil testing and the Johns Hopkins Safe Urban Harvest Study. If you weren't able to attend last week's workshop and you want to receive a recording of it, shoot me a message and I'll send you the link. I'm also going to put in the chat soon a link to like our YouTube channel, which has recordings of all of the workshops that we've had so far, and that's where this recording will go after the session. So tonight we'll be hearing and learning about crop planting and propagation from Baltimore City Master Gardener Nara Naranjit. Before I introduce her, there are just a few housekeeping things I wanted to mention. So as I said earlier, this event is being recorded and it'll be sent out to all participants after the session ends. While our speaker is giving her presentation, please remember to mute your microphone, and we'll have a short question and answer session after our speaker presents. So please save your questions for then or put them in the chat. So yeah, it is my pleasure to introduce Nara. Originally from the DMV, Nara is a Master Gardener for Baltimore City through the University of Maryland Extension Program. She is the founder of Nara Grows, which helps students to learn about how to grow food gardens. She also works for Gardener, I think I'm saying that right, a company which sells indoor hydroponic systems that use artificial intelligence to help urban gardeners grow their food at home. She also helps to diagnose and solve plant issues and diseases to help gardeners be more successful growers. And she encourages everyone to grow their own food, be self-sufficient, increase their health, and connect to nature. So thank you so much for being here, Nara. And I'll pull up your presentation now. And yeah, feel free to take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Morgan. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for everyone being here tonight. So we're going to talk about planting and plant propagation. And I'm terribly excited to talk about both. And we have a lot to cover. So let's dive right in. Next. One more, Morgan. Uh-oh, one more. Okay, so what is crop planting? So crop planting is the what, when, where, and which plants to grow in relation to their needs. And you want to make sure to provide a suitable, healthy environment so that your plants thrive. So why crop plan? It's the best way to get the use out of your space, and that way you can be more productive, and more productive means more food, which is the goal. It's a great tool to know how much you need to purchase for the year, both in seeds and in other supplies. And it's also nice to have a record for everything that you did this year, so that way it helps you in troubleshooting what you can improve for next year's garden as well. And then I think the number one reason you should do it, the number one reason to do anything, it reduces stress and limits chaos. So I've broken it down into 4 steps. The first Yep, you're right. The first step is to create a wish list. So make a list of everything you want to grow on your guide. And if you're not sure where to start, I recommend using the University of Maryland calendar as a guide. And I have that on the next slide here. So it's a 2-page document. This is the first page, and I also put a link to it in the chat so everyone can access it. Hopefully you can all see it. It lists the plants that are suitable to grow in the Maryland area, because not every plant will thrive in every area. So these are the ones that are going to do well in this area, and then the time to start planting them. And the different color codings just denotes when you plant them and how. So whether you're planting it directly in the ground or whether you're planting it indoors and you plan to transplant it outside, it gives you the zones of when to do that. So that's an excellent guide of when to start. And you can also find all of that information on your individual seed packet of what you're growing. And your seed packet's going to be your go-to guide. That's going to have all the specific information for that particular variety. Because even within some species, there'll be slight variations in the light that they need, in the temperature that they require. So your seed packet's going to have all that information. Okay, so the next step is you're going to make a series of maps. So the first map that we're going to draw is of a bird's eye view. So if you're looking over your vacant lot and what you plan to grow. Next, please. So here's an example, and you're going to plant every place that you want to grow and every way that you're going to grow. So this one has, as you see on top, they have the rows that are in ground, and then they have a series of beds, raised garden beds. And you can see right in the center there, they also have a greenhouse, and those little circles are going to be the containers they grow. So plants are typically divided into 4 categories: full sun, partial shade, and full shade. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to develop a sun map. Next. So the map on the left and the map on the top are just 2 different examples of how you can visualize your sun map. So plant areas that contain over 6 hours more sun are going to be great for your full sun plants, and any areas that receive 4 or less hours, and we're talking direct sunlight, those are going to be your full shade plants. And then 4 to 6 in between, whether it's partial sun or partial shade, it's going to depend on whether it gets more morning light or more afternoon light. And how you can figure this out, there are a couple different ways. They definitely have things on the market where you can purchase light testers, where you set it in the spot you want to grow, and it'll calculate exactly how much sunlight you can get. Or you can just do it the old-fashioned way, just time it. Just look at the spot, see what time the sun starts, and then calculate till when it ends. Then once you have those zones, you want to find the northernmost edge of your garden, and you want to mark that, because that's where you're going to put your tall plants and any plants that need trellising, because you want to put them on the northern edge so they don't block the light for their neighbors. So once you have your sun map, you're going to overlay it with your garden bed map, and you can see in the bottom corner, it's just a rough estimate to where they say, I'm going to put broccoli here, I'm going to put corn here. And you can see that to the right, they have their beans and their tomatoes. Those are going to be our climbing and trellis plants so that they're not blocking the plants below. So that's how you're going to determine which plants go in which bed. Next. So the third step is you're going to break each of those beds down into seasons. So next, you can do twice. One more. Perfect. So we're going to take one of those beds and we're going to break each bed into each season: a spring, summer, and fall. Now you're going to keep in mind that plants stay in the ground longer and can tolerate different temperatures. And you're going to find all that information on your seed packet. So you can see on the top, on your first bed, on the bottom row, carrots are going to be there through your spring and summer because they need that long to fully grow. Versus the bottom right corner, that corner is going to flip every season with bok choy, bush beans, or radishes, because those will flip over easier. So keeping in mind how long things to take, and then what time of year that it's appropriate to grow them. Okay, next. And then from there, you're going to break each individual bed into square feet sections. So this is how you're going to determine how much you plan per bed. So the squares help you guide to know how much room and it just helps minimize unused space. So you really get the most out of your garden. Next, we have a couple different ways to visualize planting a square foot garden. So I really like the one on the left. So you can see different plants have different varieties. So in the upper corner, you have your tomato and your beans. things that need to reach, and you can see only one per square foot, because if you put more than one in there, they're going to compete for resources with each other, and they're just not going to be as successful or as productive as they could be as if they were grown alone. But then you see on the bottom of the bed, much more in 1 square foot. So things like radishes, carrots, they can tolerate being much closer to each other than other plants. And again, your seed packet has all this information. Okay, next. So once you follow those steps, you'll have all the information you need to determine how many seeds that you need to order. And it'll also give you the square footage for you to figure out how much soil you need, how much compost, and if you plan to do any type of irrigation system, this gives you the square footage so you can figure out how much you need to purchase for there. There are also seed calculators. You can just Google seed calculator, and you can figure out exactly how many seeds that you need. Just a quick note about high tunnels. High tunnels are a simple covered structure that encloses your plants. Same principle as a greenhouse, except they're less expensive. And they're usually covered with a plastic or heavy fabric as opposed to glass or fiberglass of a greenhouse. So the benefit of it is that they protect you from the elements, and they can extend your season in Maryland, especially for leafy salad plants, leafy greens. You can have those fresh in the ground all the way through November, even to December. It also keeps away pests and limits diseases. It's not foolproof, but it's just less exposure to the elements, so there's less chance of something getting into your garden and causing a problem. High tunnels are really, really cost efficient. Greenhouses can run thousands of dollars easily, and you often need multiple ones for if you're planning on a vacant lot. High tunnels will cost about $3 per square foot, so it's a really economical way to maximize your garden. So that's crop planning in a nutshell. Especially if you're starting with a vacant lot, it can be very overwhelming. So just take it one step at a time, breathe, and have fun with it. Okay, so next is plant propagation. Okay, so there are 2 categories that plant propagation is separated into. The first that we're going to go into first is sexual. So we're most familiar with that. That's how our species reproduce. There's a male component, which is the pollen, the female component, which is the egg, and they mix their genetics to make a genetically different offspring, which is the seed. And then what we'll talk about a little later is asexual. That's taking a parent plant, taking a piece of it, causing it to regenerate, and it's an identical clone to the parent plant. So when we're talking about seeds, next. So when we're talking about seeds, when you get seeds in a seed packet, they're dormant. And so dormancy is just a state that the seed is in that prevents it from germinating, because it wants to wait until its ideal condition. If you put a seed in the palm of your hand, nothing's going to happen. But once you put it in dirt, add water, as long as the temperature is correct, you're going to get germination. And germination is initiated once water breaks through that outer coating of the seed and hits the embryo. So once water breaks through, the nutrients can get in, and that's when growth starts. Some plants, you just put them in and they'll naturally do it. Other plants need a little help. You need to treat them a little bit before they can break their dormancy. So 2 of the special treatments that you can use are scarification and stratification. So scarification is just, you want to gently agitate the outer coating, just scratch it a little, make a small slit, anything just to allow that water to break through that outer coating. So things like nasturtium, milkweed, morning glories, those type of plants benefit from scarification. Another process is stratification. That is keeping it in a cool, moist condition for a specific period of time. We'll go into more detail about that on the next slide, but violets and evening primrose are plants that you'll use stratification for. So I have the process here. If you want to take a screenshot, I won't go over the step by steps, but the principles are you want it to be in a cool between 32 and 50 degrees, so the refrigerator is a perfect environment for it. Make sure it's ventilated and make sure that it's moist. Once it hits 3 inches of growth, then you can transplant it into your garden. And to know whether you need to do this for a plant, you can find it on your seed packet. Otherwise, you can do normal planting, and the best way to do that is to start your seeds indoors. Next. So the reason it's the ideal method is because it's temperature controlled, and you can often control the lighting a lot more easily. And you want to use fluorescent lighting. They have grow lights on the market. If you just get your normal fluorescent lights, the tubes, those work great as well. So the main mistakes that people make when they're starting seeds indoors is they put them outside too early. If the plants aren't strong enough, or if the temperature isn't ideal for the plant to grow, it's just going to die. Another mistake is a poor environment. Either the temperature is too low, the humidity is too low, or the temperature is too high. Rather, humidity too low than too high. Too high than too low. But once you notice your plant's getting stretched or leggy, they're getting weak and they're searching for more light. If you've ever seen them lean one way or the other, they need more light ASAP. Okay, next. So when starting seeds indoors, you want to use separate pods. So I'm sure you're all familiar with something very similar to this. They have them in Lowe's, every nursery you've ever been to. And those are great because that reduces the risk of injury, the injury that you might injure the roots while you're transplanting. And it's also just a lot easier to get the plant out. Keeping them separated also encourages good airflow, and we'll talk a little bit more later about why that's important, but it can increase the likelihood of fungus, and fungus is bad. So while you're filling your container, you don't want to fill it all the way to the top so that when you water it does have some place to go. And you want to start with a moistened medium. Again, the goal is for water to penetrate that outer coating, so water is crucial. And once you're planting it in, you just want to firm the soil just on top, just so nothing loose rolls out, the wind won't blow it if you walk by. So if they're small seeds, like petunia, begonia, snapdragons, you don't want to cover them too much. They're so small and they really need a little bit of light. So you just want to gently press them on top and then spray them or mist them with soil. No heavy water, nothing that'll push them down further. If they're larger seeds, you can have a lot more wiggle room. You want to sow 2 to 3 large seeds per pack. And then if they all grow, snip the 2 weaker ones, or the weaker ones, leaving the strongest one. You always want to cut your seedlings. You never want to pull. If you pull, you can disturb the roots, and that can weaken the plant. Okay. So some considerations when you're starting your seeds indoors: your containers. So your containers must be clean and they must have good drainage. The main reason for that is to control for fungus and bacteria and viruses. So if you get fungi can kill a seedling so quickly. So you want to make sure that your soil is moist but not wet, which is why drainage is so important. You always want to use clean tools. That goes for whether you're planting or pruning and harvesting. Clean tools just reduces the risk of infection or transmitting diseases. If you do see fungus start on your seedlings, it can happen. Use a hydrogen peroxide diluted spray, just the regular kind you get at the grocery store. And then once you're done with that container, make sure to clean it out with bleach so that you don't keep that fungus and transfer it to your next plant. You want to make sure your containers are at least 2 inches deep so the roots have enough room to grow strong. And you can be creative. The containers are the fun part. You can reuse so many different things. If you need inspiration, Pinterest is a wonderful place to look at different areas or different ways you can use materials for planting. So your medium. Most people use soil. it's common, it's easy, you can find it everywhere. Peat moss is also a good option. It holds the moisture really, really well, and it has large pore space. So not only does that provide good drainage, but it also provides the ability for the roots to grow a complex structure strong. And the better the root system, the stronger the plant. There are also soilless mixes, seed starting mixes that they have, and they have peat moss in them, and vermiculite and perlite. They're the white little particles you see in soil. So those are great. Same idea. They have great drainage and they allow the soil to grow because it's so used. What the company I work for, Garden, uses, we're a hydroponic system, so there's no soil at all. And we use rock wool. This is what it looks like. It's extremely light. It's the same principle as steel wool, except this is made with rock material. And we use it because, again, well draining, holds the moisture, and it works great for hydroponic systems. So water. Again, water is life. Without water penetrating through that outer coating, there is no germination. But you want to make sure it's a slow and steady amount, because if it gets dried out and the plant tries to suck up too much, it's also going to soak up more nutrients than it's ready for, and that can damage it. It can actually burn the plant if it gets too many nutrients. So slow and steady. You want to start with a moist medium, and you want to use warm water not to shock the seed. If the top part gets a little dried out, that's okay. As long as when you put your finger underneath the surface of the soil, there's moisture in it, then you're okay. Temperature is crucial. Your seed packet will be your guide for that. Some plants, like tomato, they can handle 50 to 95 degrees. They have an optimal range at about 80. But in general, plants are happy between 65 and 75 degrees. And that's the temperature of your medium. So it's the temperature of your soil or your rock wool, whatever you're using, not of the air. That's why you see a lot of people use heating pads, or you can put your seedlings on top of the refrigerator. If you have a radiator, that's a great option to use just to keep your soil or your medium warm. After they germinate, they can handle a bit colder temperatures, but still no lower than 45. And you never want to expose a seedling to below freezing temperatures. So light can either help or hurt germination. It just depends on the plant. Things like calendula or verbena, they really like dark to germinate in dark. But things like lettuce and petunias, they need the light before they can get enough energy to break through the seed. Then after germination, that's when light is crucial. That's why you want to have your light 1 to 2 inches above your seedlings. 2 40-watt bulbs are good. The most important thing, 14 to 16 hours. Must. Windowsills usually won't get enough sunlight for you to do this. And again, if you see them leaning in your windowsill, you know they're not getting enough light, and get some fluorescent bulbs immediately. So then once you've grown your plants, what do you do? When's the next time to grow them? So you want to transplant them when their first true leaves appear. So, oh, you can't see my cursor. So you can see here 2 different plants in the upper corner. The 2 leaves on the bottom, oh, perfect. The 2 leaves on the bottom for either one, every plant, it's like they're baby leaves. They aren't very distinguishing in features. Even in the same family, they kind of all look alike. They're just the seeds that just grow. Their only function is to get enough light to survive the plant getting to its true leaves. And then once it's true leaves, that's what it starts to look like, the actual plant. So you can see the tomato plant, they have the 3 leaves there. And what is that, a watermelon plant? You can see the defining features a little more. The baby leaves are off. So when you're transplanting into the soil, be very careful to tear the roots. Damaging the roots just really lessens the likelihood that your plants are going to transfer successfully. And you always want to handle your plants by the stem, by the leaves, not the stem. The stem is the mechanism that the plant gets the water and distributes it to the plant. So it can handle a leaf being damaged. It can't handle the stem being damaged. So when you plant them, you want to plant it all the way up to where just the leaves are sticking out. You want to make sure 100% of the root is buried and most of the stem is buried to where it's just the leaves just sticking out of the soil. Then you want to firm the medium to make sure that the plant can stand up on its own. And then once it's warm enough to plant, then you are ready to plant them outside. Now, they're a little too soft when they're indoors because they've been treated very cushy. They're spoiled house cats where they have controlled temperature, controlled light. They're not used to temperature fluxes. They're not used to wind. They're not used to bacteria floating in the air. So we have to put them through a process called hardening. Next. So hardening is the process of gradually exposing them to the outside elements. So you want to start this 1 to 2 weeks before you're ready to plant them outside, and you'll start with just 1 hour a day. And you don't want to put them in direct sunlight. They're just not used to handling that, and it's really harsh. You can burn them and they can die. So put them in sunlight, start with 1 hour, increase it every day until it's ready to plant. If there's a day that's cold, that gets below 45, or is really windy, has a bad storm, that's not a day to put them outside to harden. They're just not ready to handle those days yet. Okay. Okay, then once if you're starting your seeds directly in the garden, you're not starting them indoors, you're not transplanting them, you're putting a seed directly in the dirt. The temperature of the soil is going to depend on when you can plant your seed. And again, you can find all that information on your seed packet. If it's too cold, it either won't germinate or it'll start to germinate and then it will rot, and that's bad because it can cause all sorts of problems attracting mold, fungus, bacteria. And again, fungus is bad. So your seed bed prep is crucial. Make sure that it's well raked before you plant. Make sure all debris, any extra roots, any stones, any plastic or litter that might be on the lot, that all of that is removed prior to you planting. And you want to put them in evenly spaced rows. Again, that's to control the airflow to reduce any fungus growing. All right. So let's move on to asexual propagation. So again, that's when a parent plant is producing a clone of itself to a second plant. So it's going to be genetically identical. So the several ways that we can do that are cutting, layering, dividing, separating, budding, grafting, and tissue culture. So for this talk, just for time's sake, we're just going to cover the first 4. Budding and grafting are used for trees and other woody plants. Tissue culture, you really don't see a home gardener doing that too often. That's usually for corporate or any industrial type of large scale type of productions that you want to use tissue culture as well. Okay, so a cutting. So the process, the most crucial thing, you want to use a sharp, clean knife. And the reason is just like with our bodies, if you have a clean cut, it's a lot easier for your body to heal as opposed to a rugged, jagged cut that tears the tissue and makes it really hard to heal. So you want clean, separate cuts, clean, sharp cuts. And again, sanitize the blade with either rubbing alcohol or a diluted bleach mixture to keep it clean. Once you have your cutting of your plant, and I'll show you where it is appropriate to cut your plant to propagate it, you want to remove any flowers or any buds. A plant will always send its most energy to the flower or to the bud because that's how it's propagating. That's how it's producing its next generation. So we don't want that. We want all the energy to go down into producing roots. So you're going to cut the flowers and buds off to send that energy to the roots. There's something called a rooting hormone, and it's labeled just as that when you go to Lowe's or a nursery, or rooting hormone. It's recommended. I've used it and I've not used it, and I don't know. Sometimes it makes a difference. Sometimes I think it didn't make a difference at all. But if you're having trouble rooting, then definitely try a rooting hormone. When you're using that, just the most important thing is put it in a separate container. That way, if there's anything that might contaminate it, it'll just stay in the container for that crop and it won't transfer to your larger supply. Okay, then once you have your cutting, you want to put it in a much lighter medium. So there are some that can tolerate soil. I've seen snake plants handled being put directly in soil, but water's the best. It's easier, and actually I just find it very beautiful. Here's a spider plant in water, and you can see how extensive the root system is, and it's just really nice to look at. And it'll stay in here for a really long time, for several months before I have to put any fertilizer to it. And it gets all its light that it needs and all its nutrients. Okay, so the three different kinds of cuttings are stem, leaf, and root. So first, let's go over a little terminology. So the center vein here, do you mind putting the cursor over the stem? The main vein in the center, that's the stem. So again, that's what's going to take the nutrients from the roots all the way up to the tip where the new growth is. So the node is what connects the stem to the leaf. And the node is also where new roots will form when you're propagating it. So some plants have a petiole, which is the little mini stem that connects the leaf to the node. Some plants do, some plants don't, just the way they're made. Okay, next. Okay, so all of these are stem cuttings. Where you cut on the plant, it just determines the name. So all of these really refer to the same thing. It's just where on the plant you cut, we have a different name for it. So if you look at the one that says medial and tip, if you think of those as the same plant, the tip, you just cut the very top part off where the new growth is, and you want to do it below a node. That's your tip cutting. If you have the same plant and you cut a section in the middle above a node and at least have 2 to 6 inches of plant, and again, you want to cut just below a node, the more nodes, the better, then that's a medial cutting. So basically the same cut, just has a different name because of the location. So a heel, that's what you're going to use. Oh, geraniums are a good example of ones that can use medial or tip planting cuttings. So the heel propagating, you're just going to cut out a little bit of the stem with the leaf, and you're going to put it horizontally on the soil, and the roots will form right from there. It's really cool. Similar with the cane, just make sure you have 2 nodes, and you're actually going to agitate the bottom of the cane. You can either scratch it or make a little slit, so that way the plant knows to start engaging roots in that area. So single eye and double eye, that's basically the same cutting. So some plants, the way their leaves form up the stem, they have one alternating, and then the other plants, they have at the same point plants growing on either side. So one's alternating and one's opposite. If you cut the alternating, it's called a single eye. If you cut a double, it's called a double eye. Okay, leaf cuttings. So these are great for snake plants or violets, or a lot of begonias will do that. So again, we see the petiole, which is just the small stem that connects the leaf to the node. So if it has it, here's your whole leaf with the petiole right below it, like a snake plant. If it does not have that petiole, then the whole leaf just without that part. Split veins, pretty cool. If you think about like a maple leaf, how it has the veins generating through, very similar to the palm of our hand. If you cut along those veins and you put the leaf on the soil, roots will start to form at those cuts. And then just wait till the root system has established, and then you can divide that plant up, and you have this picture, 5 new plants, which is really cool. Okay. Next. So leaf section cuttings. This one's also really cool. All this is really cool. So if you think about your maple leaf again, if you, instead of cutting slits along, if you slice the leaf in a crown shape to where you're just maintaining that vein. At the bottom of that vein is where roots are going to form. So you can slice that leaf up and you can plant those in separate pieces to begin with. Very similar to the one on the right. That's a snake plant, a picture of a snake plant. As long as it's at least 2-inch sections, you can just chop that plant right on up and you have several different plants that you can grow. You can put it in water, soil, or another medium like vermiculite or perlite. Okay, next. So you can also propagate plants through their roots. So roses are done this way, figs, lilacs do really well with this. These are usually done on older plants, they at least 2 to 3 years old, and you want to do it when they're dormant so that the roots are just a little more kind of in hibernation form and they're not as active, so you're not going to do as much damage to the plant. So for large roots, you want to take a slice at the top, and then once the roots start to taper off, you're going to cut a horizontal line. So you're going to plant it, and you want to plant the root so that the tip is level with the soil. You don't want it buried and you don't want it popping up. You want it just level with the soil. So for small roots, you want to plant it horizontally. It's going to be a much smaller section, 1 to 2 inches, and you're going to plant it horizontally, and then those roots are going to bear down. And it's this one is probably better to do indoors on a hotbed because the temperature is really going to have an impact on how successful that cutting is going to be. Okay, layering. So I like layering a lot because it deals with stolons. So this is a spider plant, and the parent plant is up here in the soil, and he has these offshoots that form down and have little baby spider plants on them. So you can propagate many different ways through using the stolon. If you've ever grown or seen strawberry plants, they also have runners and stolons are pretty interchangeable. You can do many different things. So simple layering is you just bury the part of the stolon, you have the plant sticking out, wait till the roots established, then sever the connection to the parent plant. Tip layering, you just plant the whole thing and the plant will automatically bend upwards and grow towards the light. If you have a more flexible stem, something that's like a vine, then you can do compound layering, and that's planting it in a wave motion. And again, you want to agitate the bottom for that so that it encourages the plant to make roots. So you put the stem underneath with it agitated to grow the roots, you have the leaves above, and then once those root systems are established, then you can cut them up individually. You have all these new plants. Mound layering is when you take a plant, usually a bush type, and you trim it down to 1 inch above the soil. Then you want to mound the dirt over it, and through those cuts, the plants will individually start making different root system and creating new buds. And then once those are established, you can break them up. Air layering, that's wild. So you'll see air layering with a lot of plants, like this is a money tree, super, super popular right now. So what happens with that is usually a strong woody base. So they just make a little slit, and that encourages roots to grow. And then they put a medium over it, usually sphagnum moss, and that's light enough for air to get through and for good drainage, but to still hold the moisture in and give it a structure for roots to grow in. And then once that root ball gets filled out and the root system's complete, they just chop the top right off. And then from there, new shoots will form, and that's how you see the money trees in the store. Okay. All right. Last but not least, division and separation. So these are great because they're probably the quickest and easiest way. A lot of plants form little pups, little bulbs that are attached to the parent plant. And division is when you physically separate it, you may have to slice it, cut it in certain portions. Like you see here, there are ribosomes, like there's an iris plant down here, and you can see the different areas to cut it in. And it's going to be underneath the Y. So prayer plant will also be divided that way. Separation, if you've ever seen or worked with succulents or cacti, they'll do this a lot, where they'll start forming pups on different locations on them. And even some of the pups will make a break for it and escape the parent plant, either by dropping or rolling or being carried by the wind. But sometimes, like aloe plants, you can just take them out of the soil, gently separate them, and you'll notice just by gentle pulling, you don't want to ruin the roots, but gentle pulling, the plant will naturally separate on its own. And then you can take those plants and separate them, and they'll grow into their own individual plant. Okay, well, that wraps up this brief introduction to plant propagation. Thank you all so much for your attention. I appreciate it. And I have my email here if you have any questions or need to reach out in the future. But for right now, does anyone have any questions? Is it too early to start tomato seedlings? Are you starting them indoor or outdoor? Indoor.
Type it in.
No, you should be fine. And even you could start. So, okay. So do you plan to grow them in a container, or are you going to transplant them directly onto like a raised bed? Both. Okay. So it's definitely the container one, you have a lot more flexibility with it. You can go for it. You can start your tomatoes now. Mid-March is usually a good time. You want them early summer. So I'd wait maybe 2 more weeks. The container one, you're good to go now. The one you're going to put in your raised bed, I'd wait maybe a few more weeks. You're welcome. I have a plant that's grown about 5 feet tall and starting to fall over. What's the best strategy? Well, first I'd wonder about the health of the plant to make sure that it's not dying. If it's just falling over because it's large, they have plant ties, plant supports, or you can get a trellis to support it. Oh, hold on, let's see, this one. If you are new to gardening, which is the best one to start with? Ooh, that might end up just being a preference. The best way, the one to get the most success is to definitely do it indoors on a heating pad with the lights. That way it's just foolproof. I mean, that tried and true way of doing it. There's just a little more variability if you put them right in the ground, just because there's the environment that you have to deal with: rains, winds, plants, pests. So it can be less likely. So indoor is just the safest bet. It's indoor and in a big pot. Oh, the plant that's falling over. So you can still get a trellis for it if it's, I wonder what kind of plant, because maybe you could propagate it and you could chop it up into little different ones, or if you want to keep it long and tall, there are different ways of propping it up and supporting it. What vegetable can I grow in pots on a super hot deck with full sun? Lots. You can grow lots. Let's see. So last year I had beets, parsnip. Beets you can grow in the shade. Parsnips, carrots. There's blueberries, peas, tomatoes, cauliflower. Check back to the link that I put at the top of the chat. It's the University of Maryland growing calendar that has all the different plants you can grow, and plants can do better with more sun. Most plants can do better with more sun. It's the lack of sun that you really get into trouble with. Not every plant's that way. Seed packet for reference, but it's always better to have a little more than not have enough to support the plant. Do I need? Self-watering's nice because it's a no-brainer for sure. So I love easy, lazy solutions like that. So you don't need one, not at all. Self-watering just takes so much work out of it. So if you have a self-watering pot, do that, but you don't have to by any means. You're welcome. I'm the Grim Reaper when it comes to succulents. I currently have one that's starting to go soft. I'm not watering it much, and I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. It gets plenty of sun. Could be a couple things. It could be root rot. It could be pests. So the first thing I do is repot it and see how it does in new soil. Make sure the container's clean and all the tools that you're using is clean. And then see what happens from there. And that'll help you at least eliminate what is not the problem.
I think there was one question that I think, well, I pasted the link and it kind of got like buried, but someone said
Oh, I
being
see it.
new to gardening. Oh, you see it. Okay, cool.
Yes, I see. Being new to garden, I live in Fort Washington, Maryland area, which is traditionally somewhat swampy. Will this make growing vegetables difficult? If you're planting your garden directly into the soil, just making sure that your garden is well draining. An easy way to compensate for that is to just have a raised bed. If you just put barrier between your soil and you have a more controlled environment, it doesn't really matter. Humidity can be an issue, but if you go back to the University of Maryland link, those plants are all going to do super well in our area. You're welcome. What's a natural pesticide solution? Ooh, depends on the pest. Some generic ones that are great. Neem oil is good. Also, if you just use like Dr. Bronner's soap, like a Castile soap solution, I think you can even use dish soap. Google whether you can use dish soap. I know for sure you can use Dr. Bronner's and do a soapy solution over them and see if that helps. Some pest, though, is not worth your time. If you have a spider mite infestation, I mean, fight the good fight, sure, but most likely it's not going to work out, and you're just going to have to throw that plant out or completely isolate it. You're welcome. I have a hardcore patio. Okay. Could you recommend naturally going plants to repel mosquitoes? Oh yeah, of course. Citronella is a great one to repel mosquitoes. Sage, rosemary, thyme, those are all been shown to really be effective in keeping pests away. And then will the cicada expected to be here this summer impact growth? If you were planning to grow any young trees, wait until the fall. They're just not going to make it with this a billion cicadas coming down into our area. But for your, oh, hardscape, not hardcore. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. But as far as they're not going to eat your plants. They're not interested in your plants. They're just around trees. So you don't have to worry about that. I mean, they're going to be everywhere. So will they be in your garden? Yes, they might attract birds and other things that might be pests in your garden and cause you grief. But the cicada themselves, they're just going to be loud and get in your way. Okay, my daughter and I are looking to start growing veggies. As newbies, which one should we start with? That's a good question. I really like peas. I think peas are easy and they're also fast. So they give a quick reward, and that's really great for kids. And to see the pods grow are really a lot of fun. Strawberries are a really nice, easy one. You should start seeing some of the little seedlings in nurseries pretty soon here. Maybe by the end of the month. What's another really fun, easy one? Tomatoes are good. Tomatoes can sometimes get a little wild, and sometimes tomatoes can let you down and break your heart, but I do think it's worth trying. Have a deer problem. Oof, what are some natural deterrent options that are available? A fence. Um, deer, there, yes, exactly. There are plants that they have that deer don't like, so people will grow a barrier of those plants, so they taste those plants, they go yuck, and they leave your plants. But deer, if a deer has found your garden and they know it's a good spot to get food, you're a natural deterrent, that's going to be tough. A BB gun is a little closer to the deterrent. That'll be more effective. No, I'm sorry. BB guns will hurt them. Thick skin. Is that true for rabbits? That there are plants to deter rabbits? Is that what you mean? I had I don't think I've come across plants that deter rabbits. My recommendation, if you have rabbits, is to plant them their own garden. Because again, if they know where they're going to get food, they're going to keep coming back. So if you have a patch in an area away from your garden where they know they can get food, they're not going to bother your garden that has wood and that has nets over it. It's just too much work when they know they can just go around the corner and get some yummy food. I tried going spicy peppers and not spicy Padron peppers, and all the Padron peppers ended up super spicy. Can I avoid this? Is it because I cross-pollinate? Ooh, interesting. If cross-pollinating them the next season will, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If you have two peppers that cross-pollinate, then you're going to get a mix of the two, which could get hotter peppers. That's something I've encountered, so that's really interesting. But I mean, the logic works out. Yeah, if they're next to each other and pollinating, then yeah, they could mix. Yes, if I have a family of rabbits that constantly trip up my security. I don't know if that's a problem I can handle exactly. But if you put them in a place, always encourage, you're not going to stop the behavior. That's not going to happen. You'll never win against Mother Nature. So you just do a better odds of diverting its attention to an area that you can stomach them bothering versus the plants you're trying to grow. What type of fencing is best to put up around the garden to keep out birds and rabbits? They have bird netting that's very effective. Birds, birds are smart and they're tricky, and you have to be on your game because they will scope out every little corner that you didn't lay down, every little separation in your netting. But the netting will work. Just be diligent about it. Check it because sometimes birds and rabbits can get caught in there. Um, Rabbits, you can put a normal fence will keep most rabbits out unless you happen to have itty bitty ones in your garden. Really watch out in the spring. The mama rabbits are going to be laying the baby rabbits. So as you're raking and tilling, sometimes they're buried in the soil. So just give a really gentle tap around before you start putting any heavy machinery or anything like that, because they're part of our ecosystem and they have an impact and they matter too. What veggies are easiest to cross-pollinate? Welcome. Let's see. So peas are great. That's where we get a lot of our genetic information, is from the cross-pollinating of peas back in the day by, I think it was Mendel. So peas are great. Blueberries will need to, oh, that's dual pollination. That's a little different. Let's see. I don't have too much background in cross-pollinating. Let's see. What else do I know will cross-pollinate? Watermelon, you can cross-pollinate watermelons really easily. Play around, see what you can get. Any suggestions for growing blueberries? Yes, time. When you first plant a blueberry, the first year that you plant it, you will not yield anything. You have to wait till the next year till it starts producing. And the longer that it's in production and you take care of it, the more blueberries that you get. And you definitely, blueberries need to be, they need a mate, they need a pair, because it's the mutual pollination that they have. They just need to have a friend. They don't do well on their own. So have a friend and don't expect anything the first year.
Any more questions, anybody? There've been some really great ones. It's like the best question answer session we've had so far.
I tried planting shallots and they all rotted. Do you have any suggestions for growing them? I'd want to make sure that your pot had proper drainage. Keep the soil moist but not wet. Yeah, if they rotted, it just sounds like for some reason your soil was too wet. So either overwatering, or if there wasn't drainage, or if there was just a lot of humidity and there was just a lot of moisture, that's what's going to cause it to rot. You're welcome. And again, my email, naragrows@gmail.com. So if you have any questions later, just feel free to reach out.
Yay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nara. That was an incredible presentation, and those were amazing questions, everybody. I'm gonna save this chat and yeah, send that to you all as well. Yeah, so as we wrap up our time together, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out, and remind you all that we will have one more workshop next Thursday, same time, on pollinator gardening, where we'll hear from the chair of Baltimore City Master Gardeners Pollinator Committee, Michael Andorsky, and it should be a really great workshop. So please sign up on Eventbrite for that if you haven't already. And I'll be sending a follow-up email tomorrow with the recording of this presentation, as well as a link to sign up for next week's workshop, as well as some resources and the link that Nara shared with us as well. Yeah, and just thank you again so much, Nara. That was an absolutely wonderful presentation. I think everybody very
Thank you
great.
for having me, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, well, we appreciate you. Yeah, and everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you. Bye.